And live on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back. A special. We couldn't go a week without the fellas.
Not this week.
Not especially not this week. Did we? Moved it around? We've been moving it around the past couple of years, haven't we, guys? Haven't we?
Some years we missed.
Yeah, well,
I mean, one year you said,
Not
I
when it
don't
was
want to
outside
see
that
you
time,
guys
didn't
ever. Forget about this week. I don't want to see you ever. I think you said that to me.
Yeah, certainly not the last couple of years since Michigan beat the brakes off Ohio State.
Yeah.
So
I used to be a
could not.
Stanford guy named Ed Fang, so I don't know.
Not when things are going on the field anyway, like they've been going. Joining us like they do every Thursday, but this time on a Tuesday because of the holiday, the MGoBlog crew for the MGoBlog Roundtable, joining us as they do every single week, starting off with Brian Cook. Brian, how are you this morning?
I'm well.
He's quiet.
Well. That is good to hear. Seth Fisher, how are you?
You're getting Tuesday version of Seth and Brian, not Thursday version of Seth and Brian. Just want you to know, Tuesday version is not the same. This is like the middle of UFR. We're still, sleepless and trying to figure out what happened in the last game version.
Man, sleepless. I'm right there with you, fellas. The sleepless time is always heightened this year, but even more so. Also more so this season. Craig Ross, how are you this morning?
I am channeling my inner Ed Anger. If you remember Ed Anger from the World Weekly News, who was always, quote, madder than a beaver with a chainsaw. Mm-hmm. Well, that's me. I'm mad.
Yep. All right. So let's kind of work our way up because I want to spend most of this hour on Ohio State and the matchup. But let's look back first at the news of Chris Partridge's firing 24 hours before the game. Second week in a row, they found out they're going to be without a coach right before the game, so to speak. And that was in addition to this week already knowing that Jim Harbaugh wasn't going to be there. And then, Brian, of course, they go and take on a Maryland team that they almost put away in the first half, but they let them hang around and it got interesting. But, of course, they held on for the victory.
Here's what it is. Let's talk football.
That's so the Maryland game, your takeaways.
Well, Michigan often plays kind of a sleepy game right before Ohio State, and that was the case here. Michigan, I think they ran McCarthy once accidentally, but they get out to the 23 lead, and I think everybody just starts looking forward to next week and get some dimes from Tagovailoa to draw them closer. And then, the only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is it felt a little bit more like a Lloyd Carr game this week than last week, because last week Penn State's offense was definitely not going to do anything. And you couldn't be sure of that in this game. Now, Maryland's offense didn't do anything in the fourth quarter because Michigan got ridiculous buckets of pressure. But I kind of felt like some of those calls were difficult memories of games that Michigan has blown 10, 15 years past.
Seth Fisher.
Yeah, man. Maryland hit about half their big shots, and that's what it was. They weren't really getting any. When they got things consistently, it's because Michigan was just sitting back. I was really surprised when I looked at the defense how just vanilla they were. Like normally there's they've been vanilla all year. They've been just kind of like doing their thing and practicing for Ohio State. This was extreme. They just sitting back with two deep, letting them RPO underneath them, running into 5-man boxes and just expecting the tackle to beat a double. And he would. Like the tackles would actually, they're putting on Chris Jenkins to beat a guy one-on-one, and he would. Or Grant to Graham or even Benny to win one-on-one, and they were. So that part of the strategy worked well. But Gaddis really planned this one out. I'm seeing a lot of really interesting things. One or two, and I don't know if he was on purpose or if it was just like a weird play design or like if somebody went the wrong way. He couldn't get his guys to execute everything. But like when they were dropping dimes, it was scary. And there were a couple other moments where they got guys open downfield. And really this game, when they had the wind, Maryland was able to move the ball pretty well. When they didn't have the wind, they couldn't move the ball at all. And I don't know how much that had a factor, but like they tried to run a couple times at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Michigan stuffs them, and then they're in a long down. And that's when Michigan can just start using their stunts. But there were the play right before the defensive touchdown, there's a guy open downfield and he just misses him. So like there are moments there that make me nervous because we haven't seen Will Johnson get beat. We haven't really seen what Wallace can do. And they spent the last part of the game with Samer still at cornerback and McBurrows at nickel because it felt like they didn't trust Wallace anymore.
Yeah, it's fair to say that this game has always been a problematic game for Michigan, or not always, but often. Going back to the Ball State game, I think in 2006, and last year against Illinois for sure. And the game was in between a very emotional game at Penn State and a very emotional game coming up against Ohio State. So the game is always going to have that element of difficulty. I guess I have two primary questions. Perhaps Seth has answered a bit of it, but one is it seemed like Michigan pretty routinely in this game was really light in the box and then had two safeties in the parking lot. And I thought it was curious that seemed to be primary for them, and I'm not sure why exactly.
Because they're playing Ohio State this week.
Yeah, and so they're just showing
and Marvin
nothing.
Harrison and Mika Buka, like that's where they think their dangers are. And I think that they believe that they have a good front, that Ohio State's running game is not going to be able to run on them any better than Maryland is.
I mean, that's what you think?
That's what they've done all year. Like they have been light in the box pretty much on every down that's not third and short the whole year. And I think Maryland's running backs had 56 yards on 20 carries.
Yeah, that sounds right.
If you can get away with it, then yeah, you get away with it. The concern there is that you had your two safeties back, and Maryland was still able to hit some big plays in the passing game.
Yeah,
and we saw Josh Wallace get beat on a double move that Tagovailoa couldn't hit. But then after that, they moved Sainer still outside and played with McBurrows at the nickel. And to me, that's like, that could be a plan for what you're doing in this game. But if it was clearly better than having Josh Wallace on the outside, you would have done more with it this year. Because McBurrows has about 130 snaps this year, but a lot of those were late in games that were already decided. So we haven't seen a whole lot of McBurrows in meaningful action.
Yeah, he came up and made a play though that's so Jaden McBurrow.
Oh my gosh, I love that play. I love that play where he takes the slot receiver and puts him into the knees of Tagovailoa, and the quarterback just goes spinning. That was the funny thing is there's two other guys.
That doesn't matter. What matters is how Michigan is going to cover. Because that's fine if they want to throw a screen out, whatever. They might pick up a few yards here and there, but they're going to win or lose this game based on how much they can get the ball to Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, it'll be. I mentioned it from the standpoint of that alternative, what it might look like, where the strength might lie. It might be in his physicality. Now, how will that translate to him in coverage? That remains to be seen. I think Josh Wallace will get another opportunity. And if there's any kind of leakage, I think this is one of those games where you don't wait long to make changes. I'm including offensive tackle in that mix. Like, I think this is going to be one of those games where if you are having a lot of leakage at any one spot, that you're trying to mitigate that in a few ways. Maybe there's some pocket movement things that you're doing, but including personnel things if you feel like you need to have it. Because to me, my biggest takeaway from this game was about J.J. McCarthy. It was so reminiscent to me of last year's Illinois game. It wasn't, the circumstances weren't the same. I think it was more about Illinois' defense and how boss they were, how well coached they were. That was just a squad they were facing. And I think this year it was about, JJ just not being quite on. It could be a variety of reasons for that. Maybe it was, everything that was going on outside the program. I tend to believe that what Clapp was saying about him being banged up, it kind of struck me as a guy who probably was in the training room a little more last week. And of course, Ohio State is the next week because he just missed plays that you don't see missed. And going back over it, I was impacted more than I was in the moment, thinking, man, what's going on? What's this play sequencing? Why are they doing that? And then as you watch the game in retrospect, you say, okay, I get it. Maybe you need to figure out a way to get him back in rhythm some kind of way. But I understand now watching it a second and third time over, man, it was even from the start that the first play of the game was an RPO that he missed. And that's not to alarm people. It's not to alarm people. It's to put it into some context and say, hey, this was an off game, kind of like we saw it be an off game against Illinois last year. And look at what that dude came back and did against Ohio State. Because to me, that's the game. JJ McCarthy is this game to me.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily think that Michigan needs to get an elite performance from JJ McCarthy to win this game. Because we have seen what Ohio State's offense looks like against good defenses. And they scored 14 points against Notre Dame. They scored 20 points against Penn State, and they were fortunate to not give up a strip sack touchdown on their only first half touchdown drive. And Michigan is at that level. And one thing that we saw last week is that Tagovailoa was absolutely under siege. Pro Football Focus had Michigan down for 26 pressures in this game. Tagovailoa dropped back 31 times. Now, there have to be, you can get multiple pressures on a play. I've decided that PFF is charting like this because they did not get to him on all but 5 plays. But the thing about Ohio State's pass blocking is it's not much better than Maryland's, if it is at all. So Pro Football Focus has Ohio State the number 58 team in the country in pass blocking, and Maryland is 65th. So I believe that Michigan is going to be able to get to Kyle McCord. It's going to be a road game. It's going to be a hostile environment. It's going to be his first game. And I think that he's going to struggle, especially early in games where he struggled early in basically every game he's played. So he's taken a quarter and a half to settle in for most of these games. And the Ohio State ground game has changed somewhat. They were running a lot more stretch early in the year, and they've moved to more gap stuff. But this is still an Ohio State offense that I think is like 93rd in expected points added per play on the ground. And Mayan Williams is out. Trayvon Henderson is back and has been looking good. But you go back to that Penn State game, they rushed for like 39 yards in that game. So this could be a defensive struggle like we saw against Penn State for both those games. Those are Michigan and Ohio State played the same game against Penn State. And if there's going to be a difference maker, it could be JJ McCarthy. He gets out of the pocket, he finds, and then the other one who could be Marvin Harrison. So, but I don't think Michigan needs JJ McCarthy to throw for 300 yards to win this game.
Yeah, it seems to me that you're making a good point that this could have some elements of an old Bo and Woody throwback game where neither team really does particularly well on offense. The difference is that both teams have playmakers on offense, and that was something that didn't exist quite so much back during the 10-year war. The thing that bothers me is, or the thing that I'd like to see Michigan do in this game is be a little more balanced. I don't understand why we're not throwing more play action on first down or play action at all. The one play action pass we threw in the Maryland game, you got, I think it was CJ wide open, and then JJ throws a terrible ball back behind him that was an uncatchable ball. Anything out in front of him, he has a chance on. And it seems to me they need to, I loved in the Penn State game that they were willing to run on 3rd and 10. And as I said last week, on those pass downs, they gained an average of 10.2 yards per play running it. And on the 5 times they did throw on rundowns, they gained 9.8 yards per play. So I'd like to see them go against the grain a little bit, balance the offense a little bit, as opposed to what they did in Maryland, which seemed not that.
Yeah, I think balance is not optional in this game.
Yeah.
I guess I disagree. I think JJ. First of all, I think he's going to be outstanding in this. I just maybe
You disagree with me that you need balance?
Well, I disagree. I disagree about it not being about Jay. I think JJ is the key to this game for me. I think he needs to have an outstanding performance, even if it's not his yardage. Like, he has got to be a principal piece, the principal piece of Michigan's offensive success in this contest, and I think he will be run and pass. They ran a play action pass, and I agree with you. You know, I kept wondering about more play passes. Then you go back and look, and there was a play pass in the second drive. I think it was a play after Roman went out, and you look at it on all 22, and it's a touchdown. Like, it's a touchdown. He just,
is that the one where he throws it short to Barner?
Yes.
I
don't have the all 22, so I had to look at this over and over again to figure it out. But the safety in the middle of the field,
it's a touchdown. Now again,
it goes with Colson Loveland.
So as you see it, you know, and I'm not a play caller, so you're trying to put yourself in the lane of a play caller, and that happens, and they run 7 straight plays, and they are in the end zone. A few plays right there, they score a touchdown there, so you kind of see how it kind of starts shaping your thinking. This is not his day. You know, sometimes your fastball pitcher can't locate. Happens every now and then, and this just seems like one of those days. I think it's incumbent upon the play caller you got to figure out a way to get your guy in rhythm. There's no question about that. But, you know, in the moment, in the game, I kind of get it now. I didn't get it in the game. Either way, though, in this contest, it just won't be an option. You don't have the option, in my opinion, to skew that way. At least project it. I don't think I'm projecting it like they're going to have to be more back. He's going to have to be more back in the game.
I've been bouncing up and down to respond to something earlier. It's just like you guys think it could be a defensive struggle. I don't. Like, this is Michigan, Ohio State, right? Urban Meyer's going to help put together this game plan. They had this game plan put together at the beginning of the season. Michigan the same way. They've gone 11 games keeping stuff in their back pockets against like nobodies. Even Penn State, they only used plays that were going to beat Penn State. There's a lot of offense that you haven't seen, and when you can prep, there's going to be more offense. I think it's just going to come down to, I agree with you, Sam. I think JJ's got to execute. That's what we have that they don't. They don't have a quarterback who can go and win this game for them if that's what's needed, and we do. And that's what's going to have to happen if Michigan's going to win.
Yeah, I think it will. That's why I went back and looked at a lot of the same things we said about this game. I don't know if you guys remember what you thought about before the Ohio State game, what you thought about JJ McCarthy coming out of the Illinois game. And I remember now that I went back and look at it, I remember thinking, I wonder how much they trust JJ, because there was just, there were things that they didn't put on his plate in that Illinois game. That's like, man, what is that? And they went out in that Illinois game, and maybe it was out of necessity, Brian, maybe because they didn't have another choice because Blake's out, right? Donovan's not going, and you got to let the young fella cook. And he did. And you look at this season, and yeah, it's hard to have 12 games where a guy is just going to be on point. It's the Bowling Green game and it's the Maryland game. Every other game, the guy has been money. People talk about Penn State. They only threw 8 passes, and he completed 7 of those, and then you saw him impact the run game tangibly. I just think he is the biggest advantage they have. And if he plays like we all know he can, I think they beat the crap out of Ohio State again, in my opinion.
I mean, the issue there is that Carson Barnhart has been very bad the last 2 weeks. And there were a couple incidents late in the fourth quarter of this game where Carson Barnhart was getting beat by guys who are not nearly as good as Penn State's guys or as good as Ohio State's guys. And you mentioned earlier that they might have a quick hook if that continues to happen. I mean,
That's my speculation. No one told me that, so I'm just saying.
okay,
Yeah.
but like, I would find it very difficult to believe that Hinton is actually available after what we saw. Like, no structural damage, sure, but that knee is probably, I mean, it can't possibly be at full strength a week after that. So, I mean, one of my big confusions about the last couple of years is whenever Trente Jones gets in the game, he performs. And he's performed the last 2 weeks in that bonus OL spot, and he performed when he got in at tackle in the Maryland game. And he got that holding call, but that was the weakest holding call I've seen in a long time. I'm just baffled at why it seems like he never really got a shot at a starting job. It just,
Well, I mean, my instinct about that one is that even though Trente's a good run blocker, I mean, and you've charted him, so maybe you have a different view, and it would be a better view, I guess. But when I've watched him, he's not very good in pass pro either.
well, I got news about Carson Barnhart.
Well, I know Carson Barnhart isn't very good in pass
Yeah.
pro, and so I'm not. I mean, the coaches aren't idiots. I mean, they're smart guys, and
the coaches went into the season trying to run with Miles Hinton. The coaches looked at what they had after, and they had Carson Barnhart coming back from last year. They had Trente Jones coming back from last year. They had their tackle room hail, and they went out and they got Miles Hinton and they got Ladarius Henderson, a guard and a major project. And then those guys both ended up starting sometimes this year.
And then they wasted a bunch of time trying to install outside zone, which they've run maybe twice in the past 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like,
yeah, that's all
because
right.
they're smart guys doesn't mean that they're infallible. Like, they
Right.
make mistakes all the time. Mario Cristobal might be a smart guy, but he made a mistake earlier this year.
Yeah,
Yeah, they had to figure out a way to get their perimeter run game going, and that they wound up saying, "All right, our best perimeter run plays are JJ McCarthy." I think they would have liked for it to have outside zone to be more of a part of that, but realized, to spend more time on this wouldn't be as effective as spending our time elsewhere, especially when we know when we put this guy in a run game, it changes the dynamic altogether. And that wasn't as much on the table. That's another thing that stuck out to me about this game. It wasn't as much on the table against Maryland. That struck me as conspicuous. Like, they're clearly saving that for Ohio State. Like,
Yeah, I was actually shocked that he had a live keep read even once.
Yeah.
And I want to give credit to that Maryland defender, because live, when he pulled the ball, I thought that was going to work, because I thought he was headed for the back, and he angles there and then pops outside, makes a great play. I'm not really mad about that decision to keep. I just thought that was that Braid, because he had a
Braid. Yeah, it's Bo Braid. Yeah.
I mean, he had 10 tackles. He's a safety, and his average depth of tackle was 4 yards. So
they had him at nickel a whole bunch too. They used him at nickel safety, but yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that Michigan can't let Ohio State do, right?
Mhm.
Like, we've been talking about play action passes all year, right? And you go and you look at the rate of play action passes for JJ McCarthy. He's like 59th of 90 quarterbacks who have 100 attempts.
Mhm.
And that doesn't make sense to me, because he's averaging 12 yards an attempt on play action. So let's maybe it's just rope-a-dope. Maybe it's like they don't even have to do it against most of these teams, but I would like to see a much more aggressive play action approach in this game.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any, based on how it worked last year and based on the 2 touchdowns that were on the field this past week. It's gotta be like, there's just,
We keep saying that, Sam. We keep saying it, but look at the TCU game last year. They averaged 25 yards per play action pass.
And this is why I keep talking about the chart. Like, you go through and you chart this game and you see, okay, he just wasn't. I mean, there's no way around saying that he just wasn't on. Now, how do you get him on as an offensive coordinator? That's a fair critique. Like, how do you get a guy who is clearly not locating well in this contest, whether it be accuracy on some balls, because he had some really finely placed, well thrown balls, and then there were just some that were off or misread.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the first play. He has Colson Loveland for a first down, very easy pre-snap read, He goes for a much tougher throw, and Michigan goes 3 and out, and I'm just like,
Right.
that's not something we've seen from him all year.
Right.
Like
100%.
his ability to read defenses has been off the charts. Like that throw at Angelo Gross on the against Michigan State, where he's reading the route of Colston Loveland, and he's like, all right, this guy's going to flip his hips and he's dead. Like that's what I've expected. And to see him miss a lot of not throws, because people miss throws. Maybe he's a little dinged up. It's windy, but missing the reads is something that I was not expecting.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. You're on it.
This is
You're
where
on
I
it.
think they might have missed Jim Harbaugh. I think I generally don't think the coach on game day matters that much, especially in like a weak game like UNLV or whatever. Where it does matter is Harbaugh is a former quarterback. He's definitely been part of JJ McCarthy's coaching all this time, right? It's like, I know there's been other quarterbacks coaches, but Harbaugh has been the guy. And when you go to the sideline right after after a Michigan series, you always see Harbaugh talking to JJ, right? What did you see there? What were you doing? What were you looking at? I think Harbaugh is an asset as a quarterback's coach on game days that really Michigan could have used, because Sharon, he's a lineman, and he thinks like a lineman. And when the throws weren't there, they come back in the second half after JJ made a couple terrible throws. One of them should have been an interception, and the second one was. At the end of the first half, they come back, and they're not throwing at all. They're just running the ball. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how you compound a quarterback who's off, instead of saying, all right, man, go take another swing at it.
Yeah, I think what to highlight here, because we need to get to a break, is how much of an anomaly it was. I'm curious what you guys come up with when you watch. We had them down for 5 bad reads, 4 bad throws, 11 wasted plays. That's just not him, and I just don't think that's gonna happen again, especially given the backdrop of the season and the backdrop of last year. I tend to think maybe it's to what you said, Seth, about, hey, the impact of Jim. I thought that the team as a whole, just out of the gate, there wasn't a whole lot of juice. You lost another coach. Ohio State's next week. And then I just have this sneaking suspicion for Klatt to mention during the game that, hey, he's banged up. He's good enough to play. He's well enough to play. That kind of struck me as, that's kind of conspicuous for you to mention that.
Oh, I thought you were going to mention that Klatt said they looked kind of flat in pregame warmups. So Klatt usually doesn't say like they look flat in pregame warmups. That's a hard thing to tell. And
How
Klatt
can you
normally
look flat in pregame warmups?
I don't know.
I have
Klatt's
watched.
Not the one who normally says stuff like that.
I have watched hundreds of Michigan's pregame warmups, and they are all the same.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I'm talking about how they played in the first, and it just didn't feel the same, just juice-wise, energy-wise. They got it together. My point as we get to this break, fellas, I'm just telling you, I remember JJ after the Bowling Green game, as sure as the day is long. He stood up in front of the media, took all the bullets, and he came over and he said, man, watch how I come back. What he said? He said, I'm going to be a monster. Like, I see that coming. I see that coming in this game. Just like it came last year against Ohio State after a subpar performance against Illinois. You just got to know the dude. It's hard to be 100% in terms of how you play, be perfect game after game. He was almost perfect in a lot of these games this year, granted against not so good competition. But I think it's all about this week. The focus, the accuracy, all the things that we saw throughout the season, I think are going to be back in full force against Ohio State on Saturday. And I think that's going to be the difference in this game. But let's get back more specifically on Ohio State on the other side. So we'll do that. Ira, how about we be a little generous before we get to the break, my man? If you want to join us inside of, they can hear it on the radio, maybe.
It plays. You can hear it on the radio.
All right. Just be calling number 7-734-998-1050. You'll join us inside the Bud Light Victor's Lounge. Great food, courtesy of our friends at the Carlisle Grill. Great drinks, courtesy of Bud Light. Just give us a call at 734-998-1050. And you'll join us inside the Bud Light Victor's Lounge leading up to the Ohio State game. We got to get to a break. Be back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
And we are clear on the radio.
Yeah, hey, your point about Trente, I just watching him. I think physically, he and Ladarius Henderson are their most talented guys, and for him, for him to be kind of clearly the number 4 guy from the start of the season, right? It was a 3-man competition. It became, and he was like the extra tight end. It just tells me that, man, we don't know all the elements that go into. A lot of times, I think it's not just performance. I think there's, I think, I think that's one. I'm sorry, dude. It was playing in my ear, so I got thrown off a little bit. I think that he's been a guy who they've been nurturing in a lot of ways, and I wonder if that was an element in kind of bringing him back to the starting equation. Because I agree with you, Brian. I thought he was good. I think it was a test that they had to put him out there for, and now that he went out there and he passed it, like Clad kind of pinned that corner blitz on him, and that wasn't on.
No, that was not.
No, that's on Edwards.
That wasn't on him. So, he went out there, he played well. And I'm thinking about him specifically because Ladarius is supposed to be back this week. And if you got in the game and you're having leakage at right tackle, I just wouldn't. I would be less hesitant to play Trente in that.
I mean, the weird thing is like, a year ago, he was the clear winner of that battle.
Yep.
In the offseason, and then he plays half the season. He plays well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my charting for him is great for a guy just starting his, starting career. And then he gets hurt, and it's just like, it's over. And like Barnhart's okay. Like, he's been serviceable, but like, he's not going to get drafted.
Yeah, I think if there was any difference, it was, being as assignment sound as if it's physically, he's without question the more talented guy. But, given how things have evolved or devolved at the tackle position here over the last couple of weeks, you get to a point where it's like, okay, well, he can't be worse, right? Now they had to put him in there this time because of injury. But that he went out there and passed the test, I just think it's one of those things where if you're in there and you're struggling, and you can't move the pocket every play, you can't chip every play, you can't chip both guys, right? So it might be one of those situations where it might call for making a sub. And I would feel a lot better about, if it were me, I feel a lot better about it given how he played in that game versus Maryland. So
but we are seeing what's going on in practice, and
right.
There's going to be something.
But I think there's something more there.
Part of it too has got to be it's his coach is having to be the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the running a program that
doesn't have to do with it.
But he wasn't all those things for the middle of the season.
Been the OC for the last couple of years,
yeah, but like he's the guy who wanted to start Trente at the beginning of last year, so. There's no way that has any impact.
Incidentally, does Barnhart have another year?
He might have a COVID year. I know that.
Because I wonder if it makes sense, just thinking, to move him inside the guard next year, where these pass pro issues may not be so profound, and he may have a better NFL chance playing guard.
He does have another year because he took he got a red shirt.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's got another year. Henderson's out of
Miles Hinton has
Drake Nugent has another year too. Zinter actually has another year. You're not going to get that.
Yeah, you're not going to get Zinter. He's
No. Zinter and Keegan are gone, but like technically they could. It's going to be weird, man. There's going to be a lot of 6-year players. This year, the guys who were freshmen in 2020 who all got red shirts even when they played are seniors. So next year there's going to be like a lot of guys playing their 5th year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was encouraged by what we saw from Trente. I was encouraged.
I mean, it just reminds me of the Devin Gill situation where Michigan played him at linebacker despite the fact that he was not very good because Don Brown liked him a lot.
Back on radio in 30 seconds, guys.
Wasn't this true back with another linebacker? They had
Joe
Bolden, and was
the practice all-star.
Right.
Gideon was
the better player, but they played Joe Bolden. I don't know. So
Stand by, guys. Coming back on radio. Stand by.
All right.
Back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side. Before we get back to the fellas, want to remind those of you who are in the market for a new vehicle to get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD or make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. When you do, you'll find deals that can't be beaten, like the one on the 2023 Bronco Sport Big Bend, $274 a month, $3,500 down, to $379 a month with $500 down, or the award-winning 2023 F-150, $167 a month with $3,500 down, or $295 a month with $500 down for those and other great deals. Get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD or make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. So, fellas, let's look at Ohio State. Starting with you, Brian, give me an aspect of the Buckeyes that you feel, where are they better this year? Like, where do you see them as having improved? Where are they the same? Where are they worse? Can you kind of profile some aspects of them for us?
Well, they don't give up big plays like they did last year. They got absolutely hammered, not just against Michigan, but also against Georgia. And so you're not going to see a whole lot of cover zero from them unless they're just completely disrespectful of the opposition's skill players like they were against Penn State. So they've dialed it back a little bit, and they've become much better at preventing long touchdowns. Their secondary, I think, is improved. Denzel Burke was kind of questionable his first 2 years, and now he's rounded into a guy who people are projecting as a first rounder. Their defensive line is basically the same guys it was last year, but they're all older. They've improved. Like, JTT is still kind of a guy who's more tools than production, but if you try to block him with a tight end, he will murder that man. So even AJ Barner, I think, don't do it. It's not a good idea. But offensively, they've really gone off a cliff. And CJ Stroud was obviously the straw that stirred the drink last year. And McCord, as mentioned earlier, has been pretty erratic. He almost threw 2 interceptions against Minnesota, which is a very bad defense this year. They've struggled for a lot of first halves. They were only up 13-0 on Minnesota after a half, and that was with Minnesota going 3 and out basically every possession. So they have had a huge drop off there, and their line is not nearly as good as it was last year. Now, it's not the complete disaster it looked like it was going to be after the Ohio State spring game, but they give up much more pressure, and they don't really have any progress when it comes to running the ball on 3rd and short. They've gotten some explosives from Travion Henderson now that he's healthy, but it just feels kind of like baked into the Ryan Day experience right now, is that they're going to try to run the ball and be tough and all that stuff, and it's just not going to work against good defenses. And I think Michigan is a good defense. So, to me, the things I'm worried about are Marvin Harrison Jr. and Egbuka getting over the top. And I think that they'll have an approach similar to the last 2 years where they're asking Ohio State, well, can you drive the field on us and score a touchdown instead of kick a field goal? And I kind of think that the answer is going to be no, because last year you had a lot of bailout throws from Stroud, and you're probably not going to get that from McCord, and you're probably going to get more pressure. So I think Michigan can do basically what Penn State did to Ohio State, which is hold them to a couple of drives over the course of the game, 20, 23 points maybe. And then the flip side, as we've talked, is like, okay, if we get JJ that we got for the rest of the season, Michigan's going to win this game. If we get the JJ from the Maryland game, could be a problem.
Yeah, man. I mean, where they've definitely gotten better as defensive tackle. they graduated one guy that they thought was a NFL guy who is the guy that Michigan actually ran for 75 and 85 at the end of the game. And Tyleik Williams has been a really good tackle. They're a little more banged up than I think people realize. Lathan Ransom was so awful last year, but like he was their starting safety, and he's been out. And they've been using Jordan Hancock in his place, who's just kind of a cornerback playing safety. But I agree with Brian. Like their offense, CJ Stroud, people are forgetting that CJ Stroud had a great game against Michigan last year. And like they're like, oh man, Michigan was the only one to contain CJ Stroud.
The Ohio State fans who were like,
yeah,
Michigan is the only team that ever held CJ Stroud. I'm like, he passed for 350 yards both the last 2 years, bro.
Yeah. No, Stroud is a killer. Michigan limited the damage by leaving safeties on top and just trying to make them drive the field and giving them opportunities to run the ball. And I think that they're not going to be the same against Cal McCord. They're going to throw a lot of weird zones at Cal McCord. Because McCord, if you give him man-to-man, you saw what happened to Purdue, right? Purdue was like, we got to man up because we're a Ryan Walters team. And they put a man on Marvin Harrison, and they just tossed it over his head. And Penn State, when they got burned, it was because they manned up and Marvin Harrison just, won that matchup. And that was kind of like the exposure of King, right? So that's what Michigan's going to really try to avoid. I think at one point we were looking at this going, okay, Will Johnson looking like an All-American. There was a period where I was saying that, but I think I was stepping that back a little bit after the Maryland performance and saying, look, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be destroying a lot of NFL cornerbacks. Will Johnson's an NFL cornerback, but they're going to have trouble with him too. I think he's the best of the guys who's come out of there, and they've had some really good ones coming out of there. Michigan's going to try to double him up. They're going to maybe single Ibuka, but they have some weapons. It's just about, can McCord find them? And Michigan's going to make it really hard for that.
Yeah, Brian, I think, has convinced me, and that I didn't think I started there. I thought I was more in Sam's corner, but I think he's convinced me that this game is going to depend on who plays better at quarterback. And if JJ, sort of reverts to form, and if McCord reverts to form or plays how he has, I think Michigan's going to win the game. I think Ohio State is better on defense. I do think they've taken a step back on offense, largely because of the difference between Stroud and McCord. And so this game may just come down to quarterback play.
Yeah, that's exactly where I think.
Oh, that's where you started? Okay, I'm sorry. Because at one point somebody said Michigan can win without good quarterback play. And I thought, I don't know.
I mean,
Brian said that.
Oh, Brian said that, then I'm with Sam then, I guess.
I mean, if like you go back and you look at this rush defense, and it's usually pretty good, but they gave up 4.5 yards a carry to Notre Dame. And late in that game, Notre Dame was just running it down their throats.
They were.
Notre Dame should have won that game.
They gave up 232 rushing yards at 5.4 a pop to Rutgers. And that was not because Rutgers was just running it at the end of the game. That was a competitive game through 3 quarters. So they have shown some cracks. And then, they held down Michigan State and Minnesota and Wisconsin without Braylon Allen. But, those teams are not good rushing offenses. And Maryland goes for 3 yards a carry, 106 yards on 35 carries, which doesn't sound great, but we just saw what Maryland did against Michigan with nobody in the box. So you look at the individual stats for all these players and their PFF grades, and it's like, wow, this looks like a really good run defense. And then you look at their results against a collection of teams that aren't anywhere near as good at Michigan as running the ball. And you kind of start thinking, well, maybe we can make some hay here. And then what happens if Michigan starts making some hay and looks like 2021 for a second? Well, then maybe that safety first approach on defense goes out the window. So
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I listen. I do think that they are largely the perception of them of being better is, I won't discount that they are better at defensive tackle, like you said, and they're tighter in coverage. I think it's largely a result of how reckless they were with their plan against Michigan. And people say, oh, they're much more sound than that. But is the run defense really that much better? Like, I mean, is it improved or is it good? I tend to think it's more improved, and that Michigan can run on them if JJ is a big part of it. Not always carrying the football, but that to me is the difference in this rushing attack versus the past two. They could just line up and they could plow people. And that's not the ingredient. It's still a good run blocking unit, but JJ as a factor, perimeter runs, and JJ as a factor, as a run threat, like we saw him be against Penn State, right? Springing that last touchdown, essentially. That is a key to this game. I think no matter which way you slice it, JJ McCarthy, to me, is the key to Michigan's success. Whether they win or lose, it'll come down. And I hate to put it all on one guy. Defense has to play well. I want to give you guys an opportunity to talk about Michigan's improvement defensively, because this defensive line, guys, have we seen a defensive tackle tandem on par with the guys that we're watching right now?
Tandem, there's 5 guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the best defensive line we've ever had.
This is still, well, no, because Aiden Hutchinson was on one of them. But this is the deepest line they've ever had. They have 4 defensive ends who are all interchangeable. Even Cam Good, who I completely dismissed after kind of a sketchy year last year, is playing well. And, Rayshon Benny has been the guy who's been lagging, and he's coming off 2 of his best games of his career. So they really do go 5 deep. And in a game that figures to be a fourth quarter game, that could be an advantage for Michigan, because to go back to that Notre Dame game, it felt like Ohio State was getting tired, and Notre Dame was running it down their throat. And I don't know if I think his name is Michael Hall. He's one of their rotational defensive tackles. He's been out the last couple weeks, and I think he might not be available for this game. He's not one of their starters. He's not, a superhero, but if you have to have your starters out there for a 12-play drive in the first half, you could see maybe Michigan's depth start to win out in the second half.
Yeah, Seth, I mean, it's a very, very good line. It could wind up being the best we've seen, but you pointed out one where you had Aiden Hutchinson and Ajabo on the other side. Remember in 2006, they had Lamar Woodley, Alan Branch, BG, Brandon Graham was on that D line. Like, you had some,
and then as soon as you went to the backups, and even on the starters, you had like Greg Banks and stuff like that on the 2 deep. Like this line is deep, and Ohio State has the same problem that Michigan has offensively, which is the ain't played nobody. Defensively, right? Who is Michigan? Who has Ohio State played since Notre Dame? Notre Dame was able to run the ball on them, and if Notre Dame puts 12 players on the field, Notre Dame wins that game. So who have they played other than that? Like, their last games were Minnesota, Michigan State, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, Maryland. They have not played an offense that really has moved the ball on anybody
except Maryland. And that game was 17-20 through 3 quarters. And that was with Tagovailoa throwing a couple of awful interceptions that had nothing to do with what Ohio State was doing. It was just Tagovailoa being Tagovailoa.
Yeah,
right. And we've got this problem too, right? I've been charting our defense against some awful offenses, but we just saw Maryland has a decent offense. They're like a top 25 offense, not the top of the top 25, but they're 26th, 25th, 24th, somewhere in there. And you saw how Michigan was able to perform against them, especially on the defensive line. That line has been just as good the entire way. And guess what Ohio State's been bad at all year? Picking up stunts.
All right. So, guys, we're down to it. Got to put you on the line real quick. Brian Cook, winner score, Michigan, Ohio State.
I got Michigan 7-3.
Greg Ross, Michigan, Ohio State.
I have Michigan 24-19.
And Mr. Seth Fisher.
Michigan 50-17.
Oh my God. Oh my God, he wouldn't get on the plane.
Kill him!
He would not
Get him! Get him, man! They deserve it, and they're gonna eat it. They're gonna take 50, and then they're gonna fire Ryan Day, and they're gonna hire someone who drives us nuts for 20 years. That's what's gonna happen.
All right, fellas. Hey, it's been a great ride. All regular season. Hopefully, the regular season ends with a bang. You all have a happy Thanksgiving.